Today, the new McLaren MCL35M was presented, and I wanted to discuss some interesting features of this first 2021 F1 car. Let's talk about the McLaren Aero concept first. The biggest aerodynamic problem of Formula One cars are the uncovered front wheels. They create a dirty air zone behind them, the so-called front wheel wake. That is a large cloud of low-energy air traveling along the side of the car. If this cloud hits your downstream aero devices, they will perform poorly and you will lose downforce. So the top priority for the teams is to keep this front wheel wake as far away from other parts as possible in every situation. There are different ways of doing this. Until 2018, teams could have such outwash creating upper furniture on the front wing, but this is prohibited since 2019. At the same time, the front wing got wider and some teams, McLaren included, are offloading the outboard front wing flaps and angle them slightly so to create some outwash. To regain that lost front downforce, these teams have very aggressive front wing flaps on the inboard. That, on the other hand, creates a stronger so-called Y250 vortex, with which you will have to deal with further downstream in the bargeboard area. The new 35M sticks to that concept. Now in the middle of the car we can see the influence of the new Mercedes engine. The engine is a bit more powerful and a bit more efficient compared to the Renault engine that McLaren used before. That means that the engine needs less cooling, as we can see at the side pod inlet, and very impressively at the airbox. The Mercedes-style airbox is clustered in 3 intakes. The center one is for the engine. The outboard ones are for additional auxiliary coolers for oil and the low temperature water cycle in the center of the car. The trend in Formula One is to increase center cooling to reduce the volume of the side pods and to make them slimmer. This will help you to get more high energy air to the back and to create more downforce there. But didn't we say before that we want to push the front wheel wake as far outboard as possible? Making the side pods smaller will do the opposite. So how do teams control this? They increase the side blockage to increase the pressure in front of the side pods and to push the front wheel wake further outboard and still guide high energy air towards the back. This side wing area on the renderings is actually different on the real car that we will see at the film day in Silverstone soon. As expected, the real car has more blockage in this area to compensate the narrower side pods. McLaren used both of its development tokens to adjust the chassis from the Renault to the Mercedes engine. Special about the Mercedes chassis is its extreme shape. Formula One cars used to have straight side walls of their chassis and the radiators were mounted at the sides, but this creates a pretty wide side pod. Mercedes then pushed the radiators into the chassis, which created this X shape. Disadvantage is a far more complex chassis, compromised cooling, let's remember the Mercedes cooling issues of the past, and a slightly heavier chassis. But all of this is compensated by the massive aero advantage you get from doing this. It looks like McLaren did something similar here to reach these super narrow side pods. The engine cover shape stayed the same as before. The Renault engine has the turbocharger inlet behind the engine, which means the fresh air has to travel further to the back and the engine compartment is more crowded at the back. The Mercedes engine has the turbo inlet at the front of the engine block, which means that the air is guided downwards pretty quickly after the airbox inlet. That is another reason why McLaren might had to change the chassis. And this gives you the opportunity to lower the engine cover quicker, which the 2017 Force India showed quite impressively. But the problem with this design is that you pull the air downwards pretty early and you create a shark fin vortex very early, which means that by the time it reaches the rear wing, it's pretty strong. And you want to avoid that, to not lose too much performance. So what most teams do is they keep the engine cover in its highest position for as long as possible and then pull it downwards. So the shark fin vortex starts building up as late as possible. So why do teams run shark fins at all? Because while turning, they increase the pressure on the inboard side and help to push the front wheel wake, this low energy cloud, as far outboard as possible, to not lose too much downforce while turning. So most teams want the shark fin to be as large as possible. New in 21 is the underbody cutout on the inboard side in front of the rear wheels. So what does this do with the car? A simple explanation is, under the car is under pressure, Pressure is force over area, so if I have the same pressure but less area, I have less downforce. But there's a bit more to it. In the past, the teams used this area to seal the floor to a certain degree and to build up a higher pressure in front of the rear wheels to guide the air around the rear wheels with less disruptions. All these possibilities are now gone. So the teams will focus on this area this year to regain the lost downforce. At the 35M, we can see a structure which could form a side vortex and tries to keep this further downstream in order to seal the floor again. Very interesting will be the area between the inner side of the rear wheels and the floor. Teams will try to improve sealing here. Interesting too is the rearing end plate. In the past, there were two different concepts. One was to push air outboard to increase the suction between the end plates, but this also stresses the rearing a bit more and could destabilize it. The other concept is to push air inboard to increase the pressure between the end plates, which supports the rearing and then enables you to run more extreme rear wings. Also, these aggressive wings then have a larger DRS delta because their flap is in a more aggressive position. At the 35M, we can see the second concept now, and additionally we saw the renderings with a T-wing, but the real car without. The T-wing is another element to support the rear wing and another hint for an aggressive rear wing setup. Also, we can see a pocket in the upper rear wing end plate area. The end plates are relatively fat in this position and have enough volume for such a feature. It's very likely that McLaren will position at least one vane in this position, a clever idea Racing Point had first in 2020. This upper vane creates a bit of downforce, but its main purpose is to increase the pressure on the outside of the end plate to reduce the tip vortex and hence the induced drag. All in all, the car looks super slim, which is always a great sign from an aerodynamic point of view. There was a size 0 bodywork in the past, but this is the typical Mercedes shrink wrap style. Bodyworks don't have to be smooth, blisters are okay, but they have to be as tight as possible. In terms of performance, teams suggested to start on the same level as at the beginning of last season and to recover during the season 2021. So the impressive Formula One development speed will be great to watch again. How do you like the new McLaren? Let me know in the comments below.